So we will go ahead and get started. My name is Sherry Dowling, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Society for Deaf Children. Today, we're really going to talk about parent rights and what do parents really need to know regarding parent rights. So my first question for you guys is, tell me, you put it in the chat, or again, you can open your slide or your screen. Are you parents? Are you professionals? Or are you other? Parent, a professional, parent with charge, awesome. A professional, another parent. Okay, perfect. Just so I know who I'm talking to. Let's see if technology is going to work. There we go. Okay, so we need to really start and talking about what exactly is special education and what does that mean? So special education is really, it's a vital component of the education system. It offers tailored support and resources to ensure that every child has an opportunity to succeed. And there are key aspects of what actually defines special education. It's specially designed instruction, and that means it involves specialized teaching methods and strategies designed specifically to address the unique needs of each eligible student who has a disability. This could include modifications in curriculum. It could be teaching techniques and learning environments that help the student to achieve their educational goals. Special education is provided at no cost to parents. This ensures that financial barriers do not prevent children with disabilities from accessing the resources and the supports that they need. Special education is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's customized to address the specific challenges and strengths of each individual student, whether the child requires help with communication, physical mobility, social skills, academic subjects. Special education really aims to provide the necessary tools and the supports that are needed. Special education is also provided in the least restrictive environment. And that means students with disabilities are educated alongside their non-disabled peers as much as possible. And we're going to talk a little more about that in a few minutes. But this approach actually fosters inclusion and ensures that children with disabilities have opportunities to interact and learn with their peers in a supportive setting. However, keep in mind, when we're talking about a least restrictive environment or an LRE for a deaf child or a deaf-blind child, that may not be their local public school as their least restrictive environment. It may be a different environment that could be a school for the deaf. It could be a regional setting, depending on your specific jurisdiction. And some might say, well, a school for the deaf or a regional program is going to be a more restrictive environment. So then I would argue for a child that uses American Sign Language or some kind of a signed language that needs that direct instruction. And if they are educated in the least restrictive environment as their public school, they may be the only child in that public school. They may not have direct instruction in that public school where they could have that in a specialized school or a school for the deaf. And in many people's opinion, that would be the least restrictive environment for that particular child. So when we're really talking about that least restrictive environment versus the most restrictive environment, we really need to look at the child to determine where that environment is for that placement. And it's also important to remember that special education is not a place. It's important that when we are placing children in a separate location or a classroom, instead, it's not that place that we're providing, it's where we're providing special education, but it is not special education. Special education itself is a set of services and supports that are brought to the child, wherever it is that they're going to learn, whether it's in a general education classroom, a specialized program, or it could be a combination of a couple different placements. So we have to remember that special education is not a place, it's a set of services. And I know many times when we're in IEP meetings or we're talking about services, we talk about, well, where can they be provided? They can be provided anywhere. We're not looking at a specific place necessarily. So special education is a collaborative effort involving educators, families, and specialists. We all work together to empower students with disabilities and to help them achieve their full potential. It's really about inclusion, equity, and ensuring that every child has access to a quality education that meets their unique needs. And we had a few more people join. You're welcome to open up your screen and come on the screen if you'd like, or and also if you can put in the chat whether you're a parent or a professional or another. Another charge parent, awesome. So we have a couple of parents here who have children with charge. Okay. So our parents, when we talk about parents in special education, a parent really plays that vital role when it comes to special education because you are your child's first and most consistent advocate. You bring valuable insights into their strengths, their challenges, and what their unique needs are. And this really helps educators create that effective and personal education plan when you're talking about your child because you really know your child the best. Parents are active participants in the development and implementation of their child's IEP or an individualized education program. You also ensure that the goals, the supports, and the accommodations that they receive really align with their best interests. Your involvement fosters collaboration between home and school, creates a positive approach to learning and growth, and parents really provide that emotional support and encouragement and help build your child's confidence and motivation. By staying informed, engaged, and advocating for your child's rights, you become a powerful partner in shaping a positive and inclusive educational experience for your child. So let's talk about why are parents actually included when it comes to special education in your child's IEP. So first of all, the law actually gives you this right. And I'm talking about IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is a federal law that ensures that parents have a voice in special education process and that you're active participants in shaping your child's education. No one really knows your child like you do. You have an in-depth, long-term, daily relationship with your child, and that provides that unique insight into their strengths, their challenges, and their needs. And you're going to be the only one on that team that really has that insight. You're also the only permanent member of the special education team. You know, teachers and school staff, they change from year to year, but your role really remains consistent. That consistency is invaluable in providing stability and advocacy for your child. We also know that research and experience consistently shows that special education is more effective when parents are involved. Your engagement helps ensure that your child's education plan is tailored to their unique needs and their goals. Finally, when parents are meaningfully involved, children do better and schools improve. Collaboration between families and educators create a supportive environment where everyone can thrive. So remember, as a parent, your voice matters, your insights are crucial, and your involvement is a key part of your child's success in that special education. So how can you be involved as a parent? Any ideas from anybody? And you can also open your microphone if that's easier than typing in the chat.
Constant communication with your child's teachers.
Absolutely. So as a parent, you have very specific rights that ensure your voice is heard and that your role is valuable. So first, you have the right to participate meaningfully in your special education team meetings. So these meetings are where critical decisions are going to be made about your child's education, including their IEP program. Your insights and input are essential to creating that plan that works best for your child. Now, also when I say your participation, it's not just participating in that meeting as sitting there nodding your head, yes, 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 maybe agreeing with everything, but actually having some meaningful participation in that meeting. We want you to ask questions. We want you to have, if they're not clear when we get answers, to clarify those questions or those answers. But we want you to be actually participating in that meeting and giving your opinion and your input. You have the right to read your child's school records. This access allows you to stay informed about your child's progress, the services they're receiving, and then any evaluations or reports that impact their education. You also have the right to agree or disagree with the services and decisions that are made. If something doesn't align with your child's needs or goals, you can voice your concerns and you can work with the team to find some solutions. If disagreements do arise, you have the right to use those dispute resolution methods. And these are going to be your due process, mediation, and state complaints. And these are going to help resolve some of the conflicts that ensure that your child's best interest remain that priority. So your involvement is really more than a right, it's a vital part of your child's education. And by being informed and engaged, you can help create that strong foundation for your child's success. And we had a question, how do we continue to work with teams when they have clearly different perspectives on my child's abilities? That is a great question. And how would we do that? Anybody have a suggestion? What would you do? So I am a parent. I don't think I said that in the beginning, but I am a parent of a young man who is now 30, who is deaf with some intellectual disabilities. And my son's team had a very different perspective on his abilities when he was in school. Then our expectations for him were very high, and the school's expectations weren't quite as high. So what did we do? Some of the, excuse me, some of the strategies that we used when the school kept saying, well, he's making progress. He's making progress. I went back and looked at all of his IEPs from the last 7 or 8 years, and I charted that progress because I truly didn't believe that he was making progress. And I used the school's data to chart that progress. And when we had our next IEP meeting, which I had called, and showed them, here's my chart. Here it is. Your data from the IEPs, and it clearly shows that he did make progress, and now we're going backwards. We're not going forwards. So it's important. That's one of the reasons it's important to always keep all your records, all those past IEPs, even though, I know sometimes we have IEPs that are very large, but it's important to keep them because the data that's in those documents are important and can help us in the future when we're trying to show whether or not progress is being made. Another way that you can really look at the different perspectives is you're going to make goals for your child. If you have a vision for your child of where they're going to be in the future, will your child go to college? Will your child go to a trade school? Will they have a job? Will they drive? You want to make sure you're sharing those goals, and your child's IEP should be aligned with those goals. And if not, then you need to have some serious conversations about, well, we feel my child's going to be able to drive, or we feel my child's going to be able to go to college, whatever it might be. Why do you feel it's not possible? Why do you think that might not be one of the goals we should have on this IEP? So you want to have those conversations, and you want to make sure that your vision for your child is part of that IEP. And you can actually write, if you have a vision that you've written, you can write that vision into your child's IEP. And that's just one of the ways that you can make sure everybody's on the same page. So how can you participate effectively in that meeting? First, you can understand your rights. At every meeting, you receive your parent rights. They're also called your procedural safeguards. Be sure that you always have the most recent copy because they do change. And then we're going to change interpreters. So those parent rights do change as the laws change and as your state laws change. Many times there's little tweaks that are put into those procedural safeguards or your parent rights. So make sure you have the most recent copy. Make sure that you've read through that copy and you know what they say, what it says. Now, I can tell you that most of the time, those documents are not very parent friendly when we're reading them, but you still want to know how to use them. You want to go through the document. You want to see where the different parts of the document are. You can label them. You can put tabs in there, whatever it is you need, but you want to make sure that you can reference it if you have a problem and you know where to go and how to use that. You want to prepare and actively participate in your child's meeting. So again, don't just attend, nod your head, make sure that you understand what's really being discussed. You know, as a parent, education normally is not our specialty. And most parents, we're not educators. That's not our background. And it's interesting because many times also the team members that are on our IEPs also struggle with certain aspects of special education. If our children are in a regular education program and maybe that teacher has never had a child with charge in their classroom, or they've never had a deafblind student, or they've never had a deaf student, then they may not quite understand what special education is regarding our students and our children. So sometimes we need to also not only educate ourselves, but also educate some of our team members. If you ask a question, and I've seen this happen many, many times, you ask a question and either the question isn't answered or it's not answered clearly, you can ask the question again and just, you know, I'm still a little unclear on that answer. Could we talk about this a little more? You can repeat the answer to confirm your understanding of what that answer was to your question, and that'll also help eliminate some of the confusion. But again, if the school system doesn't give you a clear answer, you want to ask that question again until you get one. Always put things in writing. If you need to request a meeting or you have a specific question, make those requests in writing. Written communication really creates that clear record of what's been discussed or what's being requested. And if it's not in writing, it's never happened. The same with your IEP meetings. You will get something called prior written notice with your IEPs. And you want to make sure when you receive that prior written notice, that's the notes from your meeting, that those notes are correct. And if not, then you want to have a conversation, send an email that needs to be changed. This was not my understanding. This is what I said, whatever it is to make those notes clarified so that it is accurate, because that's important. You never know when you might have to go back to those notes. So you want to make sure that they are clear, concise, and correct. You also want to make sure that you recognize the different roles of the people in your meeting. You know, parent and school staff have a very distinct purpose for being part of the team. Everybody's there for a specific reason. Sometimes we know that our children's behaviors, what they do, what they can and can't do, can vary between home and school. Sometimes things that happen at home don't always happen at school. Things our children can do at home, sometimes they won't do them at school. Sometimes they do things at school and they won't do them at home. So we need to understand that and also realize that the different perspectives in the meetings are coming from different places at times. You also want to ensure that documents that are provided to you are done in your native language. For example, if you primarily speak Spanish but receive a document in English, request a translated version of that document. It's important that you understand exactly what's in these documents. Additionally, make sure that an interpreter is available at a meeting if needed. And another big part of getting an interpreter at a meeting, especially an IEP meeting or anything regarding special education, you want to make sure that the interpreter has an understanding of special education or an IEP system. Because many times I've been in meetings and we've had an interpreter with a different language, and that interpreter really doesn't understand what's happening at that meeting. They don't understand what the acronyms are. They don't understand the meaning of some of the acronyms of what we're talking about. So then the translation to the parent is not clear and understandable. So it's important that we have interpreters at the meetings that have a clear understanding of special education. And that ensures that that communication is going to be accurate. So when we think about that, how does special education all fit together when it comes to regular public education? So special education and public education really work together to ensure that all students, regardless of their ability, that they receive that quality education in that least restrictive environment. And by providing individual supports and services, special education enables students with disabilities to learn and thrive alongside their peers in that inclusive setting whenever possible. So let's start with talking about what exactly is just our regular public school education. So public education is really a system of schools that are funded and operated by the government. It provides free education to all children, regardless of their background, their socioeconomic status, or their abilities. It's based on the principle of equity, ensuring that every child has access to resources, opportunities, and support that's needed to succeed academically and socially. Public education encompasses a range of academic subjects, extracurricular activities, and support services designed to foster intellectual growth, social development, and career readiness. It serves as a cornerstone of a democratic society that aims to prepare students to become informed citizens, productive workers, and lifelong learners. Public schools are inclusive and diverse. They reflect the communities they serve, and they work to meet the needs of all students, including our students with disabilities. Now, when we look at public education, we have this big, there it is, public education in the center. Okay, here we go. And then we have a smaller group of students that have a 504 plan, and they're part of the Section 504. So a 504 plan is designed to support students with disabilities in public education by providing the accommodations that allow them to access that general education curriculum on that equal footing as their peers. So we're providing the services so that they have that equal access in the classroom. So unlike an IEP, which is your individualized education program, that provides that specialized instruction. And that's under the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. The 504 plan is governed by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This is a civil rights law. So when we're looking at a 504, it's a very different law than special education. The special education law comes with funds and money. 504, the civil rights law, does not. In public education, the 504 plan ensures that students with disabilities have the necessary tools and supports to fully participate in classroom activities and school programs. That also includes after-school programs if they're sponsored by the school. It embodies the commitment of public education to inclusivity and equity, ensuring that all students, regardless of their ability, have equal opportunity to learn and succeed. And that's under that 504 plan. So we have education, we have our students that receive the 504 plan, and that's going to be a smaller group of students. And then we have the smallest group of students, and those are our students that receive special education services. So we know a 504 plan is a Civil Rights Act. Special education falls under that IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And this provides both accommodations and specialized instructions for students with disabilities. Special education is for students whose disabilities require individualized teaching methods, goals, and services that are outlined in their IEP or their individualized education plan. So special education itself is going to include a broader range of supports, things such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, could be behavior interventions, and most of the time they're going to be delivered by specialized professionals. So in the context of public education, both 504 plans and special education serve as the vital tools to ensure that equity and inclusivity. Special education really fits into the public education by addressing the unique needs of students with disabilities. They ensure they receive that free appropriate public education, or FAPE. It's in the least restrictive environment. And then together, that 504 plan and special education, that between the two, they uphold that commitment of public schools to meet the diverse needs of all students who have disabilities. Because just because a student has a disability doesn't mean they qualify for those special education services. They may only qualify for that 504 plan. Any questions so far? Okay. So how does the special education plan process actually work? And it's a cycle, and it's a cycle that just continues and continues. So we start with that referral, and the process with the referral is often made to your local Child Find program. That referral can actually come from anyone. It can be a teacher, a parent, anyone who's concerned about or suspects that your child may have a disability that affects their learning. Now, does that mean your child automatically receives special education services? No. Once a referral is done, then we go to the evaluation process. The evaluation is conducted to determine whether or not your child needs those special education services. You need to provide, as a parent or guardian, you need to provide the consent, and that is required before any evaluation can begin. The evaluation process also must meet specific criteria. It must be appropriate and focused on the child's unique needs. It should be conducted in the child's native language or mode of communication to ensure accurate results. So if your child uses American Sign Language, then that evaluation should be done in American Sign Language. If your child is a Spanish-speaking child, it should be done in Spanish. So we want to make sure that that evaluation is an accurate evaluation. A variety of tools and strategies will be used rather than just relying on a single test. The evaluation needs to be non-discriminatory, free from bias related to the child's race, language, or cultural background. And whenever possible, standardized tests that are valid and reliable for the purpose must be used. Evaluations also must be administered by trained and qualified professionals. So many times when I go to IEP meetings with a family and an evaluation has been done recently, and that child may use American Sign Language, but the person providing the evaluation doesn't know American Sign Language. Here we come back with some results, and most of those times, those results are going to be invalid because the professional was not qualified or trained to be able to provide that evaluation appropriately. Or An evaluation may not be deemed appropriate for a child who's deafblind or deaf, and we need to talk about that also. So it's important that we have appropriate evaluations for our children. Once the evaluation is completed, oh, and I should say also, you as a parent, you have to give consent for that evaluation to be done. If you say, no, I'm not going to provide that consent, the school system does have the right that they can take you to due process. If they feel that, no, this is a child with a disability, and the parent says, no, they're not going to give that consent, the school system can take you to due process to get that consent so that that evaluation can be done. And I've only seen it happen one time. So then once the evaluation is completed, then you're going to have a meeting, and that meeting is going to be held to determine whether or not your child meets the eligibility criteria for special education services. And that decision is going to be based on the results of the evaluations that were done and your child's specific needs. Then, now sometimes this meeting can be combined into one, other times it's two separate meetings. It depends on your state and your jurisdiction. But then you're going to have, once your child is found eligible, you're going to have another meeting that's going to be held to start to create that IEP, that individualized education plan. And this plan is going to outline your child's goals, the services that they're going to receive, accommodations that are needed, and how progress is going to be measured. The IEP is going to be tailored to your child's unique needs and it serves as a roadmap for their education. After the IEP is developed, all the services are agreed upon and the supports are provided. And these are going to be things like specialized instruction, could be your related services like speech, OT, PT, and also your classroom accommodations. You're also going to start talking about how they're going to monitor your child's progress and how they're going to measure that. It's going to be monitored regularly. Normally it's done quarterly, same as a child's report card. It could be included with the report card, or it could be a separate document. It depends, again, on your jurisdiction. But your teachers and your service providers, they're going to document the progress that your child has or has not made, and they're going to share those updates. Every year, you're going to have an IEP annual review. Your IEP should be reviewed at least once a year. I know there were some states out there that reviewed every 3 years. I don't know if they still do that, but we recommend to parents that you review that IEP every year. Your team is going to come back together. You're going to revisit the goals. You're going to determine whether or not your child has met all their goals. You're going to discuss the progress that was or was not made, and then you're going to make any necessary adjustments to your child's plan. Every 3 years, you're going to have a formal evaluation. And if need be, you can do that before 3 years is up, but normally it's done every 3 years. You're going to redetermine whether or not your child continues to qualify for special education services and has a disability that affects their education. And you're going to determine whether or not any of their needs have changed. So that cycle, it starts and it just continues. We're not going to redo the referral, but once we get to that reevaluation, we're going to redetermine eligibility, and we go back through that cycle at least once every 3 years. Any questions?
Hey, Sherry.
Yes.
This is Jen. Can you explain the difference between due process and mediation?
I will. We'll get to that.
Okay, thanks.
So your IEP team, and your IEP team is going to have many people, and it's going to be based on, again, the needs of your child. So I've gone to IEP meetings that have 5 people, and I've gone to IEP meetings that have 35 people. So it just depends on the needs of your child and who's going to be part of that team. So who is going to be part of your child's team? We're going to bring together a pretty diverse group of people. Obviously, The most essential are the parents and guardians. You are the most essential members of that IEP team. You're going to provide the valuable insights about your child, their strengths, their challenges, their needs. You're also going to advocate for your child and collaborate with the school to ensure that that IEP aligns with your child's best interest. The general education teacher. So if your child participates in a regular education class, at least one general education teacher is going to be included in that team. They are going to actually be the person that provides the input on how the child's disability affects their performance in general classroom settings. They can talk about accommodations or modifications that may need to be made in the general education classroom so that your child can be successful. They're also going to know that general education curriculum a little bit better. So they're going to have a little more insight when it comes to that. Your special education teacher is a member of your team. And that person is the person who specializes in designing and implementing that individualized instruction. They can help create and monitor the IEP, and they're going to also ensure that your child receives the appropriate supports and services that they need. You always want to have a school district representative that can make decisions. Many times this is going to be a principal, an assistant principal, or another administrator who's knowledgeable about the school's resources and has the authority to commit those resources to what your child needs. And we're going to switch interpreters. So also, if your child had any evaluations done, you're going to have an evaluation specialist will be there. And that's the person that can interpret the results of an assessment or an evaluation and help the team understand what your child's abilities and needs are. This could be a school psychologist, could be a speech therapist, or another professional who conducted a specific evaluation. So that person could actually change throughout your child's career depending on the evaluations that are done. You're going to have related service providers. And again, depending on your child's needs, that team might include professionals such as speech therapists, occupational therapists, audiologists, physical therapists, behavior specialists. There's so many. Could also include other people who have special knowledge or expertise. So it could be a school nurse. I've had bus drivers that have been part of a school's team. I've had interpreters be part of an IEP team. You can bring anyone you would like to your child's IEP. You just need to let the school know. So you could have a private therapist that would be on the team. You could have an advocate come with you. It could be a family friend or another family member that's coming just to take notes to help you so you can concentrate and don't have to worry about that. When it's appropriate, your student should also come to that IEP meeting. Now, as your child gets older, the law says at age 16, your child must participate in their IEP meetings. Some states, it's 14. It can never be older than 16, but it can be younger than 16. So the federal law has certain regulations that they use, but our states can make regulations that go with the law that are a little more strict. And some states, so I'm in Maryland, and in Maryland, at age 14, we're going to invite our students to their IEP meetings to start talking about transition. Now, many times we have students and our children are able to come to their IEP meetings earlier than that. And what I recommend is if your child is very young, then you might want to bring them in, just let them meet your team, especially for the first meeting, because many times the people on your team have never met your child. They've only seen what's on paper about your child. So you may want to bring someone with you to the meeting, bring your child in, let them meet everyone, and then have that person take them back out. As your child starts to grow and get a little bit older, eventually we want our children to be able to run their own IEP meetings. We can bring our children in And again, have them come in for 5 or 10 minutes. They can talk about what they like, don't like about school. They can start to meet their team. They can start to understand the purpose of the meeting, and then they can leave while you complete the meeting. And then eventually they can come in and they can start to run their meetings. And ultimately, that's what we would like to see happen with our students. So it's really up to you and your child when it's going to be appropriate for them to come into that meeting and again, I use the word meaningfully, participate in that meeting and not just sit. So when it comes to developing the IEP, this is a collaborative process that involves creating a tailored plan to meet the unique needs of a student with a disability. So your IEP is going to outline the specific goals, accommodations, services, and the supports that are necessary for the student to succeed in school. It's going to be developed by your team, including the parents, everyone we just talked about, and it's going to be a comprehensive approach to providing that free and appropriate public education, FAPE, in the least restrictive environment. Did anybody have questions about who's on your team? Okay. So what are we going to talk about when we're putting together that IEP? So your IEP team is going to engage through some. So we have a question, can you request people not to attend? It depends. It depends. For the most part, no. If the school system is asking someone to attend, they have a reason. Unless you have a really good reason why you don't want them there, more than likely they are going to attend that meeting. So it's really, I've been in meetings before where we've had a teacher that was, oh, what's the word I want? Was not very supportive at all, but the school system would not allow this person to attend because of the input that they had about the child. So it's gonna, you would have to have a really, really good reason. And what is your opinion on having a rep with deafblind projects attend the IEP? So that's a great question. And I can tell you that many deafblind projects do not attend IEP meetings, and some do. So you would need to contact your local deafblind project to see if they're able to attend IEP meetings. And if they are, I think they would be a great person because they have a very unique perspective, especially for our deafblind children, our children with charge. They can give information that many times school systems can't. And sometimes if the deafblind project is not able to attend IEP meetings, they might be able to send an evaluation report, and that if they do an assessment or an evaluation of some sort, then that document needs to be considered. It doesn't need to be included necessarily, but it does need to be considered by the IEP team. And when you submit something from outside, you need to give the team at least 5 business days to review that document, just like they need to give that to you. Okay. So in your IEP meeting, one of the things you're going to do, you're going to talk about your child's strengths and their needs. So that's how you're going to start that meeting. You're going to start talking about your child's strengths. What are their skills? What are their abilities? What areas do they need maybe a little help with? Where do they excel? And this is really going to create that positive foundation for the plan. The team is going to consider and examine the child's specific needs, their challenges, and the areas that require that additional support or intervention. And we have another question, is 5 business days to review the document, policy or courtesy? And again, that's going to depend on your state. Here in Maryland, it is part of our law. We have a 5-day policy that you need to receive a draft IEP before a meeting, 5 business days prior to that meeting. Not all states do that, but you can ask for, and I should say also in Maryland, there's no real teeth behind that law when it comes to enforcing that law, but it is written in our policy here. So you would want to check with your state to see, and you can find that normally in your code of regulations for your specific state. Okay. So you want to also make sure that when you're talking about your child's strengths and your needs, that you write those down before you go to your IEP meeting. Because you get into that IEP meeting, you start talking about all kinds of things, and you might think, oh, I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to talk about that. So as you start thinking about, what are your child's strengths? What are their needs? What do they do well? Write them down so you have it with you and you have it in writing so you don't forget anything. We also want you to share what any of your concerns are. What are your aspirations for your child? What is your vision for your child? And that's one of the pieces that can absolutely be written into your child's IEP with their prior written notice, that this is my vision for my child. And this is going to help you guide that IEP also. So you're also going to talk about any concerns you have about their academic progress, any social development problems, behavior, or future transitions. So it's important that you give that input and also to provide your family's priorities and goals when it comes to your child. Your team is going to review any of the assessments or evaluations that were done. That's going to provide that objective data about your child's current performance levels, their strengths, their areas of difficulty. And this information, again, is going to help to develop those goals and objectives for your child. You're going to have a discussion that's going to talk about identifying what your child requires to access the general education curriculum and to achieve that meaningful progress. This could include accommodations, modifications, specific teaching strategies that are all tailored to your child's needs. You're also going to identify any special education services or related supports that your child needs. Anything such as speech therapy, again, OT, PT, behavioral interventions. These services are going to be designed to address your child's unique needs, and it's going to help them to achieve the goals that you're going to write into that IEP. You're also going to look at special factors that need to be considered. Are there behavioral challenges that your child has that may impact their learning? Are there special communicate when completely blank. Are there any special communication needs, especially for children who are deaf, hard of hearing? Are there special language needs for students who are English language learners? And are there anything special related to vision that needs to be written into that plan? By addressing these kind of needs, that IEP team is going to ensure that your plan is going to be holistic, it's going to be actionable and tailored to help your child succeed academically, socially, and emotionally in that least restrictive environment. So we're also going to have those measurable annual goals written into the IEP. And these goals really play a crucial role in guiding your students' progress and ensuring that they're successful. Your goals are going to be clear. They need to be specific. They need to be tailored to address your child's unique needs. You're going to identify what the skill is or the behavior that needs to change in that goal. You're going to name that specific skill in that goal. And it could relate to academic skills, social emotional development, communication, motor, or any other area that's really relevant to your child's success. You're going to report on your child's current level. So we're going to talk about what are their present levels of performance. How is it in relation to whatever that particular item is for that goal? And that's going to include any data from evaluations, classroom observations, teacher and or parent input. And you're also going to have that understanding that the current level provides that baseline for measuring your progress. So once we have that baseline, then we're going to know, is your child making progress? Are they going forward? Are they going backwards? What's going on there? You're going to set a reasonable achievement for a 1-year goal. So based on your child's current levels, the team's going to determine what the child really can accomplish in that 1 year's time. The target should be challenging for your child, and it also should be promoting meaningful growth. But we also don't want unrealistic expectations. So for some of our children, we should expect to have 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, depending on if your child is blossoming in something. It could be a 1.5 year growth in 1 year's time. I've seen that happen many times. And for some of our students, it might be a 6-month growth in a 1-year period. But we want to keep, as parents, we want to keep our expectations as high as possible, but realistic. And we want to share those goals with our team and our expectations with our team. They're also going to outline how you're going to track that progress and how we're going to know whether or not our children are meeting their goals. It could include assessments, it could be observations, it could be data collection or specific performance metrics. Regular progress monitoring is going to ensure that our team can make adjustments as needed, because that IEP document can be changed at any time. If your child meets a goal within the first 6 months, then we want to have a meeting and we want to change that goal. We don't have to change the whole IEP, but maybe we need to change that goal. If we look at a goal and we're on our 3rd semester of school and we're not even close to meeting a goal that's on that IEP, then we need to have a meeting and talk about why we're not meeting that goal, what needs to change so that your child does meet that goal. So some of the other things we're going to talk about in that IEP, we're going to talk about progress measurement, again, how we're measuring those goals. One of the things you need to be really careful of, and I've seen this happen also, is that we're looking at several ways to measure progress and if progress is being made, not just by teacher observation. Because every once in a while we'll have a teacher that, oh yeah, they're doing this. Yep, they're doing this. We're doing this. And it's only by teacher observation, and there's no real data to support that they've made progress with that goal. So we want to make sure that we have more than one way to measure those goals. The IEP is going to have specifics on the special education services that are being provided. The services are going to be designated to, again, meet your child's unique needs and to help them achieve those goals. You're going to have in there the dates and the places for the services, when your services are going to begin. Normally they begin the day the IEP is written, how often they're going to occur. So if your child's receiving speech therapy, it's going to say they're receiving speech therapy 2 times a week for 30 minutes. It may be in a group, it may be pull out, it may be individual, it may be push in the classroom. That's all going to be itemized and written in that IEP. It's also going to talk about where, if the service is going to take place in the general classroom, in a resource room, or in another setting. Again, when your child turns 16 or 14 or whatever it is that your state mandates, you're going to start talking about that transition planning. You're going to talk about what your child's life is going to look like when they leave high school, when that school bus stops coming. You're going to talk about post-secondary education. You're going to talk about employment. You're going to talk about independent living skills and community participation. Your IEP is going to include very specific transition goals or a transition plan, and that's going to be written to support those post-secondary goals and those transition goals. Now, when we talk about our IEP, when we get to that transition piece, your transition goals should lead your IEP goals. So your IEP goals should be focused on your child's transition goals so that we're really working towards that life after high school, no matter what that looks like. You're also going to talk about age of majority when your child turns 18. In most states, in some states, it's 21 for a child with a disability, but most states it's age 18. Then your child has rights, and you don't necessarily have the same rights that you had. So in some states, when your child turns 18, even if they have a disability, then they can take away your rights to see their school records and to make decisions. So you need to talk about that and make accommodations based on your child and what the needs are going to be. Another part of the IEP is you're going to be talking about statewide assessments. And if your child will be taking those standardized tests, if they'll require accommodations, and accommodations could be anything like extended time, a quiet testing environment, or if they're going to participate in an alternative assessment that's designed specifically for students with significant disabilities. You're also going to come to a time when you're going to talk about whether or not your child is pursuing their high school diploma or a certificate. And we're going to change interpreters. So you're going to talk about, you're going to come to that point where you're going to talk about whether or not your child will be pursuing that high school diploma or a certificate of attendance. And you're going to have a conversation about what are your child's needs? Are they able to obtain that diploma? Can they pass whatever tests are needed in your state to be able to get that high school diploma? Or do we need to talk about transitioning into that certificate program where we're focused mostly on those life-based skills? And we have another question. What are some examples of other ways to measure goals? So you can measure goals based on test scores. You can measure goals based on evaluations that are done. There's some more informal evaluations that are done. It could be behaviors from, or not behaviors, it could be observations from if your child has a one-on-one aide, it could be observations from the teacher aide. It could be a lot of different things. You just don't want to rely on one source. And it could also be observations from home. If the school's saying your child can if one of your child's goals is that they can tie their shoes, and if they're tying their shoes in school, but you're not seeing them tie their shoes at home, and maybe the goal is they have to tie their shoes 3 out of 5 days a week. And the school said, yes, they're tying their shoes 3 out of 5 days, and you've not seen them tie their shoes once at home, then I would say, no, they haven't met that goal. Because your observations are that they're not tying their shoes, whereas maybe the teacher observation is. And does that need to be included in the IEP? Yes, it does. That's going to be part of the goal, is how they're going to measure that goal. And then another question, when do you choose between functional skills versus general education? What if you want your child to go to a state school where they can get both functional and education? So whether or not they go, so I'm going to assume that question is a state school would be like a school for the deaf or a school for the blind. So that's going to depend on your state. So there are some states, and Maryland is one, where we are a parent choice state. So in Maryland, if you have a child who's deaf, you have the right to determine if you want your child to attend the Maryland School for the Deaf. And if you want that, then you need to apply to the Maryland School for the Deaf. You have to go through their admission process. And if your child is accepted as a student there, then, and we have counties here in Maryland, then the county cannot say no. Then you have that right as a parent. It's not an IEP team decision. In other states, it is an IEP team decision. And that's when, and if you come together as an IEP team and your district or your county says, no, we can educate your child, that's when you have to look at, number one, is your child making progress in the setting that they're in? Number two, do they have access to peers? Do they have access to direct language, or are they learning through an interpreter? So you can look at all these pieces and you're going to take that back to your IEP team. And those are the things you're going to talk about to support your request for a different placement, whether it's at a school for the deaf or a school for the blind, whatever it might be. So you're going to have your argument as to why the school system is not providing that appropriate education for your child and why they can't meet their needs. And it could very well, if you have a child that needs both those life services and also that academic piece, and they really need that direct instruction. Sometimes some states it's hard, and other states it's a little bit easier. So it just depends on what state you're in. And then another question: where children can stay in school? Oh, I see. Okay, I think that goes with the other one. So where they get both functional and education, where children can stay in school in the school system till 21 years of age. Do parents still need some type of documentation to establish that parents are still the decision-making authority? I see what you're asking me. Okay, so when your child turns 18, depending on your state, and that's what you need to find out, is when you have a child with a disability in your state, what is the age of majority? Is it 18 or is it 21? With some things, it's always going to be 18. So with selective service, if you have a male child, they have to apply for or register for selective service. So they can vote at age 18. They can drink at age 18. Or no, they can't drink at 18 anymore. It's 21. But there's going to be certain things that no matter what, they become an adult at age 18 and they have those rights. If your child's a child with a disability, when it comes to education, in some states, the state has in their regulations that because the child has a disability, they don't become an adult. They don't reach age of majority in the school system until age 21. So that's something you need to check in your individual states. I know in Maryland, we still, as a parent of a child with a disability, you still have education rights over your child until age 21. But every state's going to look a little different. Okay. Okay. There's that one. Okay. So you've created that IEP, you've gone through the whole process, you've made a document that you feel good about with your child, and you think everything is good. Then I want you to look at that document and I want you to read it, what's in there, and think about what your meeting happened, because we always encourage parents not to agree with the IEP until you've thought about it. Take it home overnight, let it settle, and then come back to the school and say, yes, we agree with everything written in this IEP, or maybe you don't. Most states now, you don't have to sign an IEP anymore. It goes into effect automatically, but we still want the parents to agree. So I want you to think about this question. Is this IEP an appropriate step towards a productive and independent life for my child? So when you look at the IEP that you've developed with your team, can you answer that question in a positive way? And if you can, then you've done a great job. And your IEP, you should be happy with the IEP that you've put together. And if you can't, then maybe you need to go back and do some tweaking. Okay, so what if you disagree with the IEP or something that's written in there? So disagreements with an IEP team decision, it can be challenging. Believe me, I know. But there are also steps that you can take to advocate for your child effectively. You need to, again, goes back to understanding your rights is the first step. You have several options when it comes to requesting either another IEP meeting or to address those concerns. So the first thing you can do is request to have another IEP meeting and address those concerns that you have a problem with or you think are inappropriate. You are going to submit something in writing that says, I don't agree with goal number 3, and this is why. So you want to put that in writing and request that informal meeting to talk about your concern. If that doesn't work, you can go into dispute resolution methods, and you can go to mediation, due process, or you can always also file a state complaint. And these are going to be the three processes that normally are designed to resolve those conflicts and to move forward. So mediation. Mediation is going to be a voluntary process where a neutral third person mediator, they help the parents and they help the school representatives, and each side is going to discuss what your concerns are. You're going to do it in a neutral setting. Neither side is normally going to have an attorney there with you or an advocate or anything like that. You're going to just kind of go back and forth until you can come to an agreeable solution. The mediator's job is not to come to a solution for you, not to give either side any advice. They are a completely neutral party that keeps you on task to come together to form a resolution. You also can go to a due process hearing. A due process hearing is going to be a formal legal procedure where both parties you're going to present your case before an impartial hearing officer. It's usually an administrative law judge or an ALJ. This option is going to be used mostly for disputes where you cannot come to an agreement. It could be about identifying a child with a disability, about evaluation results, it could be placement, or it could be about the provision of FAPE, of free appropriate public education. It's going to be much more structured, and it's going to involve evidence that you're going to have to submit, witnesses, and legal arguments. If you get to a point where you ever have to go to due process, the process itself moves very quickly. You don't want to file a due process case until you have everything in place. It's also very, very highly recommended that parents always go to due process with an attorney, and an attorney that knows whatever your child's disability is and also knows special education. Because I guarantee you the school system will have their attorney ready to go. A due process hearing can be very expensive for parents, and many times, I remember seeing statistics a few years back, and I think these were just in Maryland, but about 80% of due process cases that were filed are won by the school system. So you need to be prepared if you get to a point where you have to go to due process. You can also file a state complaint. That is the easiest way to resolve a dispute. Most of the time in your states, a state complaint is going to be filed with your state education agency, your state Department of Education. And it's normally when you feel that the school has violated your federal or state special education laws is when you're going to file that state complaint. You're going to show how your child's rights were violated. If your child did not receive a free and appropriate public education because they had and I'm going back to using your child uses American Sign Language, and they did not, or written in their IEP is that they're going to have an accommodation of an interpreter. And the first 6 months of school, they did not have an interpreter in that classroom. So your child had no access to language during the first 6 months of school. That could be looked at as a violation of a free appropriate public education because your child did not have access to what was happening in that classroom. That would be a prime example of a state complaint. Your school system or your State Department of Education is going to investigate the complaint. They're going to talk to both sides. They're going to come up with a solution, and they're going to send that out. Many times in this, that solution can come back to say, you need to the school system that they must provide that ASL interpreter. Now, there could be times where the school system comes back and says, we advertised the position, we couldn't find somebody. Right now, that's something that's happening, not just with interpreters, but with teachers, special education teachers, some providers, because there is such a shortage. So you have to kind of think, keep that information in the back of your head also. There's also, in some states, facilitated IEP meetings. And that's where a facilitator comes in and attends your IEP meeting. And again, that facilitator is not there to make any decisions. They're there to strictly facilitate that IEP and keep things moving forward. So that way, if a conflict does arise, that facilitator is going to bring everything back, everyone back to focus and it's going to help you resolve that issue. But they're not going to give an opinion and they're not going to come to a specific conclusion. They're just going to facilitate that meeting to keep you on track. And we had a question, is it worth submitting a formal complaint with the state even after a resolution has been reached? No, if you've had an informal meeting, you've reached a resolution and both sides agree, then there's no reason to file a formal complaint. You wouldn't have to. Now, if you reach a resolution and you would have that in writing in your child's IEP, and the school system does not fulfill that whatever that resolution is, then yes, you would file a formal complaint. That would be probably your next step. And is not having an interpreter for a deaf student in an IEP also against fate? It depends. If it's written in your child's IEP that they have an interpreter as an accommodation in the classroom and that interpreter is not being provided, then yes, it is a claim that your child is not receiving a free and appropriate public education. FAPE is being denied because they're out of compliance with fulfilling that IEP. If in that IEP it's not written that your child has a sign language interpreter, then no, it is not. Now, if you're in a dispute with whether or not your child needs the sign language interpreter, that's a different story, because then you're going to go into your resolution complaint or your um, um, dispute resolutions. I went blank. You're going to talk about your dispute resolutions, and that would be that a formal complaint could be one of your ways to resolve that complaint, that you feel your child's first language is American Sign Language and they need a sign language interpreter to access the materials in the classroom. This is why, and the school system doesn't agree because they say he has hearing aids and he can hear fine, and can access the spoken language. Then you can file a complaint about that. Does that make sense? And are there any cons to having a facilitator? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you have a meeting that tends to go long, a meeting that gets off track, if you have, many times you have conflicts, having a facilitator is just another way to keep a meeting moving forward. Okay. Any other questions? And I should have said this in the beginning. I am not an attorney, and I don't pretend to be one. This is just information that we have that's in our parent rights and that we've learned along the way. So any questions? We have about 10 minutes left. I was worried we were going to get through all that information. Where can I find the code of regulations and any addendums of them? Depending on your state, you can usually do a Google search and find them, or you can, they should also be on your State Department of Education's website. And also in the back of all of your procedural safeguards, there's going to be free or inexpensive or low fee supports that you can also contact. So in Maryland, we have disability rights, and they can also, that would be a question they could easily answer, is to where to find your regulations for your state. Do you have any specific resources on laws for deafblind students? I don't have anything necessarily specific for deafblind students. It's really looking at the needs of your individual child and kind of looking at what the law says as far as your individual child goes. I mean, it's the law itself, IDA is fairly general. Um, so it's kind of interpreting that based on your child and what their needs are. And that's kind of why when we talk about our individual childs, it's an IEP. Everything is going to be very individualized based on the needs of our children and what they need to be successful. And what happens if you don't have a state qualified administrator to do testing? We have nobody who has experience with deafblindness. That's where your deafblind project can come in and help you to find somebody that is qualified to do those assessments. Is it correct that even if the state has its own interpretation of the policy, it's the IDA wording of the policy that matters and is ultimate? So yes and no. So like I said, your state regulations can be more lenient, but they can't be stricter. No, they can be stricter, but they can't be more lenient than the federal law. So the example is in Maryland, we have the code of Maryland, it's called COMAR. And we say that children have to be invited to their IEPs at age 14. And the federal law says age 16. So in Maryland, we have to invite our students at age 14, but the federal law says 16. So we're a little more strict when it comes to that, but we couldn't go back and say, no, we're not going to invite our children until age 18. Unfortunately, what my child needs, an intervener or protactile specialist, is not currently in the law, so advocating for it has been unsuccessful. So that is not unusual. It also is not in our law here in Maryland. But you need to talk about, and again, this is where your deafblind project can come in and help you advocate. And you need to talk about what it is that, why does your child need that intervener? And there's some school systems that'll say, well, we'll give your child a one-on-one. So then you have to kind of explain the difference between that intervener where they're giving, they have that language support, they have the protactile support if needed. They're taking that what's happening in the classroom and bringing it into language that your child can understand. So you need to really be able to explain what the difference is between what the school may be offering versus what that intervener can actually do. Some deafblind projects can actually do some training and with interveners. So if a student has a one-on-one aid, then they may be able to provide either some funding to send that aid to school to get a certification as an intervener, or they may be able to come in and do some training directly with that aid if possible. But again, every deafblind project is going to be a little different. So you want to talk with your project in your state to see what it is they can offer. And why are interveners so hard to come by? That's a good question. And I wish I had an answer, but I don't. And deafblindness is, deafness is a low incidence disability, and deafblindness is even a lower incidence disability. And unfortunately, we have a lot of school systems that, because it is such a low incidence, our kids aren't always top on the list. So we need to get it out there. We need people to understand what an intervener's role is and why they are so important for our kids. I think I don't know if so. The question is this specialty fairly new? I want to say it is, but I also want to say it's not. I think it's more recognized right now, maybe. And maybe I don't know, I don't think Jen is still on the call, but maybe Becky is still here and might be able to answer that question a little bit better than I can.
Well, I think it's Becky. And so I think if we think all the way back to Helen Keller, right, she had her intervener, and the name is escaping me at this moment, Annie Sullivan. Thank you. Um, so, so Sherry is right. It's been around for a long time, but it's just now getting the recognition that it deserves. And part of the problem is that as Sherry mentioned, we can get a paraeducator or one-to-one to fill that role. Um, but then we need them to go back for further education, right, to learn how to specifically work with the deafblind student. But the school systems don't want to pay the one-to-one for that additional knowledge and that additional work. So lots of times, paraeducators will say, I'm not going to do this if I don't, I'm not going to put all this energy and work into learning this and implementing it if I'm not recognized for the role. So we're working hard to get intervener recognized on the IEP and to get it more recognized across the state of Maryland, so that we can help our kiddos who are deafblind have greater access to their educational environment.
Thank you, Becky. Any other questions? You're very welcome. Thank you all for being here today. Okay, we have another question. Can an intervener be both through the IEP like a related service and a supplementary aids and services? Becky, how is
Ask
that
me,
in our IEPs here?
ask me the question one more time.
An intervener, can it be through the IEP as a related service or supplementary aids?
It's a related service, I believe.
Hey guys, this is Jen.
Oh, you are here.
I am here, so kind of here. It can be either. So we do have a letter from OSEP, the federal government, to the National Center on Deaf Blindness. They wrote a letter stating that even though intervener is not one of the roles on the drop-down box on an IEP, it can be written in if needed. So a related service can be written in if a child needs a certain thing. Because it's not, though, often school teams put it under supplemental aids because it's easier to do that way. Sometimes they'll do the drop-down box and put the provider as interpreter and then write in intervener, deafblind intervener, or it could be under paraprofessional and then it's written in describing what the role of that individual needs to be to meet the needs of that child. So it can be done kind of in either way. I also want to let you guys know, just make sure that our parents are aware of the IEP discussion guide on the National Center of Deaf Blindness's website. You can find the IEP discussion guide about is an intervener appropriate for your child with deaf blindness. The CHARGE Syndrome Foundation should also have a checklist on their website, an educational checklist for children with CHARGE syndrome. And there is, if you Google it, an IEP discussion guide or IEP checklist for proficient communicators. So if your child is a proficient communicator, but is deafblind, there is also another checklist for that, I believe, out of the Texas School for the Blind or Texas Deafblind Project has created.
Perfect.
Hope that helps.
And Lydia said, unfortunately, that OSEP letter was not enough.
Yep, that sometimes is the problem, is that yes, that still the school systems are not always willing to recognize it because it's not federally mandated yet. That's the barrier that we are all fighting.
Yes, and so to expand upon the response, an IEP will say service delivery hours, etc. on the IEP. Correct? You're going to have the number of hours will be written on the IEP with whatever services your child's receiving. And Jen, can you send me the OSEP document and I can forward it to everyone that's here?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. So thank you all very much for being here today. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact your local deafblind project. If you have specific questions for them, or if you just need help with strategies, just let me know.
And don't forget to take the poll.
That's right. Forgot. Have a good night.